and now we are going to talk about another kind of transparency, the transparency and consent framework, and what we are going to explore developments being made by EAB Europe's transparency and consent framework. Please, welcome Christoph Zippel, Senior Legal Counsel for Xandr and Chair of IAB Europe's Policy Working Group, to the stage. I guess he is currently being equipped with a microphone, as all of them were used. After this very last talk, I will have the pleasure to ask Townsend Fihen to come on stage, as she is CEO of IAB Europe, for a final word. We are getting close to the end. Thank you very much for staying with us. So, once again, would you please welcome Christoph Zippel, Senior Legal Counsel for Xandr and Chair of IAB Europe's Policy. Or not. I can also make a little dance or something like that. Or if someone wants to prepare the very first question for him. He's coming right now. Yeah, under your applause, of course. Floor is yours. I am going to introduce you to. Okay, so Ninon Vagner, who is Privacy Director at IAB Europe, Stefanie Beckmann, Director Digital Media Ecosystem of Seven.One Entertainment Group, and Julien Delhommeau, Staff Systems Architect of Xandr. Please join Christoph on stage, and I'm sorry for this messy introduction.
Perfect. So, Julien, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you well. Can you all hear me?
Perfect. So welcome everyone to today's panel discussion on the latest development and evolution on the TCF. And we have with me on the stage, I'm Christoph Zippel, I'm Senior Legal Counsel at RTL Deutschland and Chair of the TCF Policies Working Group, and with me is Stefanie Beckmann and Ninon Vagner and Julien online. So let's start with a short round of introduction, and maybe you can tell the audience what your connection to the TCF universe is.
Yes.
Ninon, would you like to start?
Yes, I'm Ninon, and I'm the Privacy Director of IAB Europe, so I look after the iteration of the TCF and the aftermath of the APD ruling.
Stefanie?
Yes, I'm Stefanie. I'm Director Digital Media Ecosystem for Pro7, and I spearhead all the projects on privacy. So TCF rollout, but also now the TCF, looking at it, and Google Sandbox, all this.
Thank you. And Julien?
Hello everyone, so I'm Julien. I'm working at Xandr as a staff system architect. So I work mostly with product team on the privacy and identity. And I've been working on TCF ever since 2018. And I've recently, earlier this year, took the role of chair of the Framework Senior Working Group at IAB Europe. So the group that's basically working on any technical specs that comes into the TCF V2.
Thank you. So let's jump right into the topic. The first half of 2022 has been, let's call it, challenging for the TCF 2.0 and everyone who is relying on the standard. And this is mainly due to the APD ruling that has contested quite some parts of the TCF standard. And especially now there's an appeal proceedings, and the APD has asked for a so-called action plan to address the issues that have been raised by them. So my first question is to Ninon. Can you give us like an update about where we stand with the proceedings, as well, especially with the action plan and what has come out of our work on the action plan yet?
Yes. So first maybe about the appeal. So we are appealing the decision before the Belgian Market Court. We want to have the decision overturned. We and in particular disputing the finding that IAB Europe would act as a data controller for the TC string, which is the digital signal that is used to record user choices. And so we submitted this appeal beginning of March. We expect a decision probably mid-summer, late summer this year. However, there is a possibility for the Belgian Market Court to refer questions to the European Court of Justice, in which case the appeal procedure will probably end at the end of 2023. And on the other hand, we are also working on the execution of the decision, because the decision is already unforeseeable. So the decision, as Christoph said, required us to submit an action plan with corrective measure to the TCF within 2 months after the decision. And it also gives us 6 months from the validation of the action plan to execute it. So we submitted the action plan at the beginning of April. And so now we are in the review process by the APD and also by other data protection authority. So it's likely to take a while. We know that it's not going to happen before the 1st of September at the earliest, but the fact that there are other data protection authorities involved in this review process is mean that it's likely to take some time, but it's also positive because it means that the resulting action plan will be fitted not only for Belgium but for everywhere GDPR applies.
Thank you. Julien, we've heard the legal part and the policy part of the story now. Regarding the more operational issues and parts that come out of action plan and changes to the TCF, do you think that the changes that publishers and all the others in the system presumably need to make are really significant?
Yeah, so on the technical side of things, we've been working, as Ninon explained, on the action plan, basically from February through April, and try to come up with both policy change and technical changes in the specification to try and address the concern from the APD. First thing, maybe before I go into how those changes are going to be, how much effort those changes are going to involve on the market, just a reminder that the action plan that we've produced so far and that we shared with the APD is not final. As Ninon mentioned, this will be validated by the APD at some point. There may be some back and forth between us and the APD. So if some items in the action plan that we addressed to the APD felt like they don't fully address all of their concerns, they may come back to us and say, this part is good, you can keep it, but this one, I'd like you to go further, or I'd like you maybe to do that instead. So we may get feedbacks, which means that some of the changes that may need to be done, we don't know them yet. But from the changes that we've anticipated so far, from the action plan that we've produced and released to the APD, we expect that the changes will be, let's say, mostly on the publisher level, as there will be less efforts to migrate to that new version or to those new specification. There will be less effort than it was from moving from TCF V1 to TCF V2. In the changes that we've made, there are a lot of best practices that have been turned into must. There's been like some API functions that we've removed to the benefits of some others. So the changes are not, again, for now, and this may change depending on the feedback that we will receive or may receive from the APD, but so far the changes that we anticipate will not be as big. On the publisher side, there will be some changes on the vendors and CMPs, but again, those should be manageable for the most part. And then there are some other action items we're discussing which are not directly related to the APD, but may come later at a different stage.
Thank you. Stefanie, you represent a big publisher in the ecosystem. So can you give a publisher's view on the TCF and evolving TCF, the APD ruling? Do you still rely on the TCF? Did you change the way you work with the TCF or with vendors or in general?
Perhaps I take one step back. We're not only a publishing company having more than 100 platforms at hand, but we are also like an edtech company. So we have our own ad server, we have our own DSP, SSP, DMP. So we kind of have seen this shock that the APD ruling brought to us from very many perspectives, leading us to a lot of complexity. But for now, we 100% rely on TCF 2.0, super happy with it. Obviously, there has to be changes, but this was planned anyways. So we depend on like an evolving standard that is like a guideline for the industry. A problem to us is like the turmoil we have right now caused by legals that kind of bring us a complexity and uncertainty that is not beneficial for the ecosystem as a whole. So yes, for us as a publisher, it's a huge problem. We have a huge task force with 50 experts involved, meeting every week to discuss like the latest insights and the latest news, what it brings to all of our business, so both publishing and edtech.
Thank you. So yeah, we have discussed legal, operational, and business side of all the current events and what the APD ruling has triggered and is following. But moving forward and apart from the APD ruling, post-cookie environments are being discussed in the market a lot, especially third-party cookies are not seen as a future-proof technology anymore. So Julien, regarding the TCF, is the TCF adopting to a post-third-party cookie environment? And if so, how is the TCF doing that? You're muted.
Thank you, Christoph. So, thank you for the question. I like this question because that's one, I think it will allow me to address one of the concerns or misconceptions that I've seen for over a year now from many in the industry. Many people have been asking me, like, why am I still working on TCF 2.0 when third-party cookies are going away in a couple of years? And the reason is nothing in TCF was ever designed to be cookie specific. TCF is here to address mainly two things, which are e-privacy, so accessing the user's storage, and this includes cookie, but not only, and then addressing GDPR, so the processing of personal data, whether cookies are involved or not. So TCF is really here to address those two main privacy law regulation directive in Europe. We don't know exactly what the post-third-party cookie world will look like, but we have seen some alternatives start to emerge, right? So you can think of first-party ID for publishers, you can think of universal ID, industry ID, such as LiveRamp, UID2, and others. You can think also of the browser solutions, such as the Privacy Sandbox, and the other proposals that are being discussed right now in the W3C. So all of those alternatives, they rely still on device storage. If you think about Privacy Sandbox, a lot of the processing will be happening directly on the user storage. So it's still subject to e-privacy. And people that will make use of the proposition will likely require consent to do it. First-party ID for publishers, that will still likely involve first-party cookie, which from a technical point of view are not threatened by the browser's deprecation of third-party cookie. But first-party cookie are still cookie, they're still accessing the user storage, and as such they still rely on e-privacy, still subject to e-privacy, still rely on consent. And industry ID, same here, and all of the solutions also still involve like personal data processing. So still subject to GDPR, and people that are going to process personal data are still going to have to rely on legal base to do that, so consent, legitimate interest. So with all that in mind, even if third-party cookies are going away in a couple of years, the TCF will be still as, if not more, relevant to the industry, because there will still be personal data processing, there will still be device storage access, and potentially even more if you consider Privacy Sandbox, which heavily rely on accessing the user storage. So I think investing today in TCF is really a future-proof solution. Is going to be one of the foundation of what the future will look like, however it will look like.
Thank you. Stefanie, anything to add from a publisher and edtech company perspective?
Thank you. Well, it's really complex for us. There's like so many things going on at the same time, and we are really concerned that it's not like one clear road that we can take, that suddenly we have breaches here and breaches there, or like different kind of complexity levels, but it's always the same people that are involved from our sides. It's always my edtech colleagues that play like a really big role. It's always the same legal. So it's very hard to focus attention both on all these kind of privacy issues that we're facing right now. And this is like a big challenge for us as a project team working on this with everyone. Very time consuming.
Yeah, I agree. Ninon, are there any other developments and changes to the framework apart from the APD ruling that you would like to share with the audience?
Yes, sure. So this is the most recent change to the TCF that was introduced in March. So we introduced new B2B field for vendors. So vendors are now required to provide additional information about the environment where they operate, for example, whether it's web, in-app, CTV, the countries where they operate. What else? I think there are also, the place of establishment, lots of additional data with the objective to help publishers select a subset of vendors that they want to work with rather than using the full global vendor list. So these vendors have until July 14, I think, to fill out this new information. And I think it's going to be really helpful for publishers because we know that it was an issue, especially for smaller ones, to actually identify which vendors contribute to the selling and buying of their ad inventories. So this is going to be helpful to filter to some extent the vendor list and reduce the number of partners that they rely on. There are also going to be additional information about international transfer, so transfer of data outside the EEA. There are lots of scrutiny from regulators right now on international transfer, and they currently and the responsible publisher for ensuring the compliance of any subsequent transfer outside the EEA. So there will be information about this, as well as the mechanism that are used by vendors for such transfer. And there will also be a contact point, a direct contact point. So this will also help publishers do their due diligence over the vendor that they use, especially on international transfer. And then there is a more technical part. I think we are going to ask Julien to describe that, but this is an update to the device storage.json file. So it already existed, but it was optional. It will now be mandatory, and other information have been added, but I'm going to let Julien describe that better than I.
Anything to add from the technical side, Julien?
Yes, thank you. So the last specification that Ninon was referring to, the device storage disclosure, will be aware, and again, like Ninon mentioned, that's something that already existed, but will now be mandatory for vendors to provide. And it will contain basically two kinds of information. The first kind of information will be with regard to detailed cookie usage. So today in the TCF, mandatory is already for vendors to disclose whether they use cookie, whether they do cookie refresh, those kind of information, but that's still at a very general level. The device storage disclosure will contain similar information, but very with a much more granular approach, where vendors will be able to disclose which cookies they use and for which purposes each cookie that they use is being used for, the max time of each of those cookies. So again, much more granular. As almost every time we go and make a new addition to the specification, we try to go for more transparency. So that's the case here. And the second kind of information that will go into the device storage disclosure will be the list of domains that are being used by a vendor. This will be mostly useful for other vendors that want to better identify, or even publishers that want to identify what specific endpoint or what specific pixels that they see on their website, they see in a creative, what vendor is behind this, and being able to ensure like a stronger compliance, make sure that whichever vendor is being called, whichever endpoint, so domain appears in the creative, appears on a website, is linked to a vendor that belongs to TCF, for which a publisher has disclosed this vendor to the user, and the user has given consent, or the legitimate interest was established. So again, much more information. I know that, for example, at Xandr, we do have this product that we use where we try to identify vendors present in the creative. We do that by scanning the different domain pixels that are present in the creative, and then try to link those back to vendors. This work was a lot of effort for us to be able to reconciliate a domain with a vendor, because there is no such list mapping that exists today. With this information from the device storage disclosure, the vendors will be asked to provide this mapping of all the domain that they use publicly. So it will make this work much easier, and I guess I imagine that, I anticipate that other vendors will also start enforcing some stricter rules on creatives that deliver on the website, and which vendors are present on this website and can actually are legitimate to be part of the creative and deliver on the website.
Thank you. So going back to the APD ruling for one more time, assuming that the IAB Europe wins the appeal, totally wins the appeal, can we still expect iterations in the TCF then, or will it remain as it is?
No, it's not going to be set in stone. So yes, of course, if we win the appeal, I mean, we are disputing the fact that we act as a data controller and joint controller in the context of TCF. We are not disputing the idea that TCF should evolve. So there will be obviously new iteration to the TCF, irrespective of the outcome of the appeal procedure. But I think what has been the blocking point until now to iterate on the TCF to further specify the minimum requirement that it encompasses, the fact that data protection authorities have different interpretation of the law across country, which makes it really difficult to set out additional requirements within the TCF. But know that, 4 years now after GDPR came into force, I think that we are starting to see some convergence between DPAs. They are also working together a bit more. There is a task force on cookie banner at the EDPB level. The EDPB is also working on dark patterns. So I think that there will be material for the TCF to evolve and specify additional requirements. And the other part of the TCF, which is equally important, is everything related to the TCF compliance program. And so we started that in 2019, and it's evolving progressively. It's extremely important for TCF participants and end user to trust the mechanism. So similarly, like these programs are going to evolve. I think, and I see Tony here, that we are really looking forward to see the result of the accountability platform at OL to use that in our compliance program. So yes, TCF will still evolve.
Thank you. So I guess there's one last question for everyone. Where do you see the TCF in like a year from now? So let's start with Stefanie. What do you think? Where will we be next year?
We really hope for a strong TCF. We really hope for a comprehensive guideline for the industry, for us, with all these complexity that we have, to really have like a clear guideline what to do. Because we want to be compliant, this is not the issue, but we need like a certain rule set for the economy, because it's so interlinked. You have to talk to so many people. We have like more than 400 vendors in our vendor list. And this is obviously also part of the problem, but still you have to be able to communicate. You cannot just say, okay, there is no TCF and just deal with it. So we really hope for a strong, comprehensive 3.0 approach. And pitching in as much as we can with knowledge, with insight, both on IRB level and on BVDW level in Germany.
Julien, what do you think? Where will we be in a year from now?
I want to echo what Stefanie said. Is I think the industry needs more structure. We need more reinsurance, legal reinsurance, and I think TCF is doing this. And I think that, well, as you mentioned at the beginning, like the APD case is obviously a challenge for the industry and for us, and we need to adapt the TCF. We knew we needed still to make TCF evolve. What I feel is an opportunity here is that whatever comes out of this, we will have the discussion, further discussion with the APD, with other DPAs, and at some point we'll have to find some agreement on what needs to be done and what's not, and this will give the reinsurance that the industry needs. So why it is challenging, I think the opportunity for us is at the end of the day, with TCF, we will have something that would be have some form of approval from the DPAs, which will give the insurance that vendors, publishers, and CMP need to be able to work in that market.
Thank you. Ninon, anything to add?
No, I think it's probably the same message. I think we are all hoping for a stronger TCF. So, of course, nobody is pleased that the TCF was the object of an enforcement action by the APD. We would have preferred to have policy guidance, but ultimately, like, the only outcome that is possible of this enforcement action is better clarity and more legal certainty for TCF participants. The APD was really clear that it does not want to go back to a situation where there was no TCF. They said a situation where there was no TCF and everything was happening behind closed doors. That's what they said. So we know that they want more of the TCF ultimately. So yeah, probably next year it will be a stronger TCF. Then I want to flag that it does not all depend on us because we are waiting for the APD and other DPA to review this action plan. So still a bit uncertainty over the timeline, but hopefully next year would be in a better place. Yeah.
Let's see, but I'm confident that we will be. So to conclude, we see with or without the APD, TCF is an evolving standard to meet regulatory and technical requirements also in the future, and hope to have a strong standard next year and have, somehow, I wouldn't say survive, but somehow like cope with the APD rolling. So thank you all for participating for today. Thanks for listening, and keep using the TCF as a standard, and bye-bye. Have a good day.